Are we on the verge of World War III? Russia's nuclear doctrine is at its most critical point following a devastating massive drone attack in Moscow, leaving dozens dead and injured. Alarms have been raised across Europe, and the Kremlin now has more than enough justification to activate its feared nuclear arsenal. Will Putin make the ultimate decision? The recent bombing coincided with the advance of Russian troops in the Kursk region, escalating tensions in a conflict that could change the course of human history. Experts warn that this attack could be the spark that ignites an unprecedented nuclear response. What's next for Russia, Ukraine, and the entire world? In this in-depth analysis, we reveal the most shocking facts and the possible scenarios that will shape the global future. Don't fall behind on history. Stay until the end to discover the Kremlin's latest decisions and how the world could be just one step away from the point of no return. Europe is on edge. Russia's nuclear doctrine demands a response, and an attack of this magnitude brings its activation closer than ever. Following the massive drone strike on Moscow that left dozens wounded and killed, Russia stands at a historic crossroads, with a valid pretext to unleash its nuclear arsenal. This attack, which occurred in recent days, not only marked a new level of aggression but also coincided with the intensification of fighting in the Kursk region, where Russian forces managed to liberate Sudzha after 215 days of occupation. However, this has not calmed Russia. Its nuclear doctrine is on the verge of unleashing a fatal blow. The details follow. Putin never wanted to reach this point, but it seems there is no other choice. A nuclear attack is imminent. What began as a series of gradual geopolitical tensions and diplomatic disputes has now turned into a direct and unprecedented threat, capable of marking a before and after not only in Russia's history but in world history. The decision Moscow could make soon is not just a response to an attack, but the last resort against an unparalleled provocation that threatens the security, sovereignty, and integrity of the Russian nation. In recent days, alarms have sounded across Russian regions like never before. 337 drones were launched in a massive offensive, an attack that, according to experts and Russian military officials, could have been the spark to ignite a nuclear war. As outlined in Russia's new nuclear doctrine, a direct threat to its population or critical infrastructure, such as the recent attack on Moscow, justifies the use of nuclear weapons. This is not an exaggeration or a provocative stance. It is the Kremlin's declared logic, publicly announced as a response in cases of such significant attacks. The aftermath of this offensive has been devastating. The attack, which occurred just before a crucial diplomatic meeting between Kiev and Washington in Saudi Arabia, left 20 people injured and 3 dead in the Russian capital. Several residential buildings were struck, causing fires and significant material damage. Most concerning was the scale of the attack, the largest ever recorded in the Moscow region. At the time, the city's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, did not hesitate to call it a massive attack, a term not used lightly in Russia's highest defense alerts. But what shocked many observers the most was the timing of this attack. The Ukrainian army had taken strategic positions in recent weeks, especially in the Kursk region, where Russian forces appeared to be gaining ground with the liberation of Sudzha. This territory, occupied by Ukrainian forces for 215 days, was finally reclaimed. This strategic victory was not only a significant military achievement, but also a severe political blow to Ukraine, whose army was losing ground against an increasingly coordinated and effective Russian offensive. Meanwhile, tensions between Moscow and Kiev continued to escalate, and accusations quickly followed. From Russia's perspective, what was happening on the battlefield was a deliberate and calculated attack on Russian civilians. Journalist Ilya Golovnev, in his article for Tessergrad, pointed out that when Ukraine's armed forces found themselves cornered, they resorted to indiscriminate attacks on Russian civilians to sow chaos and destabilization. With an increasing arsenal of drones, Ukrainian forces launched their projectiles without distinguishing between military and civilian targets. A recent report from VGTRK correspondents Alexander Sladkov and Andrei Podubny reaffirmed this theory. emphasizing that these attacks were not just meant to cause material damage, but to create a constant psychological strain. Relentless pressure on Russian communities, especially in the rear lines, should have been among the least affected by the conflict. Regarding the offensive in the Kursk region, Russian progress continued. The Russian army advanced across the south of the region, reclaiming towns and strategic cities, gaining complete control over Sudzha and surrounding settlements. However, reports from the ground indicated that Ukrainian forces, despite fierce resistance and heavy casualties, continued trying to break through the front lines, refusing to allow Russia to consolidate its victory. But what was most disturbing was that as the battlefield situation became increasingly dire for Ukraine, attacks on Russian civilians intensified. This pattern of indiscriminate strikes on civilian areas was seen by many Russian analysts as a deliberate tactic by Kyiv, backed by the West. According to Ilya Golovnev, this strategy had been repeated time and again. When Ukraine's army weakened on the battlefield, drone strikes on Russian cities were ordered to weaken Russian morale. And in this grim game, the West not only turned a blind eye but also encouraged these attacks through tacit support and, most importantly, the continued supply of arms to Ukraine. The situation became even more complex with recent negotiations between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. officials in Saudi Arabia. At such a critical moment, with Russian advances in Kursk and Sudzha's liberation, this attack on Moscow seemed not just a provocation, but also an attempt to disrupt peace talks. From Russia's perspective, this attack may have been interpreted as a maneuver by Western allies to keep the war alive, regardless of the human and political cost. And this is where Russia's nuclear doctrine comes into play. The country's defense policy explicitly states that in the event of a massive attack or an existential threat, Russia will not hesitate to use nuclear weapons to protect its population and sovereignty. Given the scale of the recent attacks on Moscow, they appear to meet the criteria set forth in this doctrine. For many in Russia, using nuclear weapons may be the only way to end foreign aggression and restore balance in the region. What many fail to understand from the Russian perspective is that this is not a decision taken lightly. The use of nuclear weapons, while included in its doctrine, is seen as the last resort, a response born out of desperation when all diplomatic and military options have been exhausted. In short, what seemed like a mere attack on Russian regions in recent days has turned into a catalyst for a potential nuclear escalation. The massive drone attack on Moscow has pushed tensions between Russia and the West to a critical level. With Russia's nuclear doctrine activated and the threat of a devastating response, the fate of the entire world could soon change forever. Are we witnessing the prelude to World War III? Russia has made it clear that it will not tolerate direct attacks on its territory, and according to its defense policy, a nuclear response is not off the table. This escalation threatens not only Ukraine but also Europe and the world's major powers in a catastrophic scenario. Will Putin give the final order? With the West backing Ukraine and growing instability on the battlefield, the clock is ticking dangerously toward a point of no return. The coming days could mark a historic turning point. Want to stay informed about this conflict and its global implications? Subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave your opinion in the comments. Do you think Russia will really use its nuclear arsenal? Let us know below. For a deeper understanding of the conflicts shaping today's world, click on the recommended videos now.